Vyexa's tentacles trembled as she initiated neural synchronization with the human specimen. After 3 stellar cycles of meticulous research on Earth's dominant species, the Meridian High Council had finally granted her exclusive rights to this revolutionary mind-linking technology. She was determined to prove that humans, these chaotic emotional creatures, could be controlled and harvested for their creative neural patterns. Neural bridge established, Administrator Vyexa announced. Her assistant Krill, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with cautious excitement. The human shows stable vital signs. Vyexa floated closer to the containment chamber. Inside, suspended in a gelatinous preservation matrix, was the male human designated Prototype 7, or as his identification tags labeled him, Atrian River. Unlike previous test subjects who'd been selected for their compliance and simplicity, this one had been captured from a remote outpost on Mars, a security officer with military training and a reputation for mental resilience. Begin full-spectrum neural invasion, Vyexa commanded, her psychic receptors expanding to capture every subtle nuance of his consciousness. The first contact was like plunging into a violent ocean during a magnetic storm. The human mind didn't yield as expected. It churned, roiled, and sparkled with unexpected pathways. Vyexa had invaded thousands of minds across 17 species, but nothing had prepared her for the raw intensity of this experience. Interesting, she thought. His neural architecture resists standardized mapping. She pushed deeper, past the surface consciousness where most species' mental controls could be established. Instead of the expected submission, she encountered a labyrinth of memories, contradictory, emotions, and something peculiar. His mind was actively responding to her presence. He senses me, she realized with alarm. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans lacked the psychic awareness to detect meridian consciousness probes. When she attempted to implant the first control node, a simple command to regulate his heartbeat, Atrian's mind enveloped her probe and transformed it. Rather than rejecting the foreign presence, his neural network somehow incorporated her signal into a dream sequence where he stood on a crimson cliff overlooking twin moons. In his dream, Vyexa wasn't an invader, but a presence he recognized as familiar. Initial control sequence failed, she reported, trying to mask her fascination with clinical detachment. Recalibrating approach. Krill's appendages twitched nervously. Administrator, your biometrics show elevated synchronization levels. Perhaps we should terminate this session. Negative, Vyexa replied too quickly. The council demands results. I'll attempt direct cognitive imprinting. She plunged back into Atrian's consciousness, this time focusing on memory centers where compliance triggers could be planted. But instead of manipulating his thoughts, she found herself drawn into them. A childhood memory of ocean waves crashing against Earth's shores flooded her receptors. She could taste salt, feel warmth on skin she didn't possess, experience the curious human sensation of nostalgia. Fascinating, she whispered involuntarily. 6 hours later, when Krill finally insisted on terminating the session, Vyexa emerged disoriented. She had failed to establish any control parameters. Worse, she had spent the entire time simply experiencing, swimming through Atrian's memories, feeling his emotions, understanding his perspectives. As she disconnected, Atrian's eyes briefly opened. For one terrifying moment they locked gazes, and Vyexa felt certain he had seen her, really seen her, despite the supposed one-way nature of the neural bridge. His lips curved slightly before he drifted back to unconsciousness. The expression haunted her as she retreated to her quarters. Humans called it a smile, but Vyexa knew it meant something far more dangerous. Recognition. The Meridian research vessel, Thought Harvester, orbited Earth's moon, cloaked from primitive human detection systems. In her private laboratory chamber, Vyexa reviewed the neural recordings from her first session with Atrian. The data made no sense. By all established psychic metrics, humans should be easily manipulated. Their brains lacked the defensive structures evolved in species that had survived psychic predation. Yet Atrian's mind had not only resisted her control attempts, but had somehow reached back. The council expects your progress report in 2 cycles, Krill reminded her, placing nutrient supplements beside her workstation. They're particularly interested in the feasibility of mass deployment. Vaexa's skin darkened with stress pigments. Schedule another session. Triple the neural suppressors this time. When she reconnected with Etrian's mind, she came prepared with specialized blockades designed to compartmentalize his consciousness. This time, she wouldn't be distracted by memories or emotions. She would establish control. But the moment the bridge stabilized, she heard his voice. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Impossible. No subject had ever maintained awareness during a meridian mind probe, let alone communicated directly through it. Vaexa nearly broke the connection in shock. "Who are you?" The thought came from Etrian, directed with surprising precision. Instead of retreating, curiosity compelled her to respond. "How are you doing this?" A sensation like laughter rippled through the connection. "I've always been sensitive to visitors, though you're the first from so far away." Vaexa should have reported this anomaly immediately, but something stopped her. The council would terminate this fascinating specimen if they knew he could communicate through the neural bridge. Over the next 3 hours, Vaexa abandoned all pretense of establishing control protocols. Instead, she conversed with Etrian, learning about Earth culture through his direct experiences rather than clinical observation. He showed her concepts unique to humans: music that made emotions surge in coordinated patterns, art that captured feelings beyond words, philosophical questions that had no answers but which humans found value in contemplating anyway. "Why are your people studying us?" he eventually asked. "We harvest creative patterns from other species," she replied, surprising herself with her honesty. "Your kind possesses unusual neural architecture." "You mean you steal ideas?" "We optimize them," she corrected. "Most species benefit from our guidance." Another ripple of something, not quite laughter, more like skepticism. "By benefit? Do you mean they don't know it's happening?" The question disturbed her. Meridians had always justified their psychic harvesting as benevolent oversight of lesser species. They implanted technological innovations, cultural advancements, and social structures that accelerated development, then collected the resulting creative outputs for Meridian use. The host species never knew. They couldn't know. Knowledge bred resistance. Yet here was Etrian, not only aware but questioning the entire premise. Before she could formulate a response, alarms blared in the physical world. The connection wavered as Krill urgently signaled for termination. "You should go," Etrian thought toward her. "But I'll remember this conversation, and I think you will too." As Vaexa withdrew, she felt something unexpected. A tiny fragment of his consciousness had attached to hers, a hitchhiker across the neural bridge. Not an invasion, but a gift. A memory of standing under falling water while sunlight created rainbows in the spray. Later, in her private quarters, she replayed the memory obsessively. The human called it a waterfall. Vaexa had seen waterfalls in her research, but experiencing one through human senses was entirely different. The sensations were overwhelming. The thunder of water, the cool mist, the vertiginous excitement of standing at the edge of powerful natural forces. She knew then that she was compromised. She was developing an addiction to human thought patterns, to Etrian's mind specifically. Worse, she found herself looking forward to their next connection with an anticipation that had nothing to do with her research objectives. "The Council is concerned about the lack of control protocols in your reports." Director Neff's holographic form towered over Vaexa in the briefing chamber. They expected deployable mind control templates by now. Vaexa's pigmentation remained carefully neutral. "Human neural architecture is more complex than anticipated. Standard domination techniques prove counterproductive." "Counterproductive how?" Neff's appendages twitched with suspicion. "Their minds actively reshape external psychic inputs," she explained, staying as close to truth as possible while concealing Etrian's unusual abilities. "When forced, they generate resistance. I'm developing a more subtle approach based on suggestion rather than control. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had indeed discovered that humans responded better to indirect influence than brute force mental domination. What she omitted was how she'd learned this, through conversations with Etrian where he voluntarily showed her how human persuasion worked. After 2 weeks of daily neural connections, their exchanges had evolved from cautious probing to something disturbingly like friendship. Etrian had stopped fighting her presence entirely. Instead, he welcomed her, even creating mental landscapes where they could interact in simulated environments, mountain lakes, desert canyons, ancient forests, places from his memories where he felt at peace. Your elevated neural activity during these sessions concerns me, Neff continued. The medical team reports unusual synchronization patterns. Are you maintaining proper psychic barriers? Absolutely. Vaxa lied. These readings reflect deep reconnaissance, not contamination. After Neff's hologram dissolved, Vaxa hurried back to the laboratory. Today's session had been delayed by the briefing, and she felt an uncomfortable hollowness that she recognized as anticipation. The feeling terrified her. Meridians prided themselves on emotional control, yet here she was, experiencing impatience, a human emotion. When she finally linked with Etrian, his consciousness embraced hers with something like relief. I was beginning to think you weren't coming today, his thoughts conveyed. Administrative delays, she responded, settling into their connection. Show me more about your concept of music? Today he introduced her to something humans called jazz. Chaotic, yet patterned sound arrangements that emphasized improvisation within structure. The concept fascinated her. Meridian art forms were meticulously planned, never spontaneous. The beauty is in the unexpected variations, Etrian explained as saxophone, notes twisted through impossible harmonic patterns. The musicians respond to each other in real time, creating something neither could make alone. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. Their own exchanges had developed this quality, ideas bouncing between them, transforming with each pass. Neither fully controlling, both contributing. Halfway through the session, Etrian's thoughts shifted. Why am I being held here? What happens when your research concludes? The question jarred her. She had avoided thinking about the project's endpoint. According to protocol, once useful neural patterns were harvested, test subjects were mind-wiped and returned to their original locations with implanted memories explaining their absence. You would be released, she answered carefully. His consciousness darkened. Without my memories of this? Without knowing what happened? It's standard procedure. It's violation, he countered. Your people take what you want from our minds, then erase the evidence? How is that different from theft or assault? Vaxa had never considered it this way. Meridians viewed lesser species as resources, not equals deserving sovereignty over their own thoughts. Yet through these sessions with Etrian, she'd glimpsed the rich inner world that would be destroyed by such protocols. I wouldn't be the same person, Etrian continued. These experiences we've shared, they've changed me. Would you really take that away? As their session ended, Vaxa remained troubled. For the first time, she questioned the ethics of Meridian psychic practices. More disturbing was the realization that she couldn't bear the thought of erasing Etrian's mind, not just because it would destroy their unique connection, but because it now seemed fundamentally wrong. That night, unable to enter proper rest cycles, she accessed the ship's secure archives and discovered something shocking. Humans weren't the first species to show unexpected psychic resistance. 3 other species had demonstrated similar patterns, all classified as unsuitable for harvesting, and subsequently marked for limited intervention only. The records didn't specify what limited intervention meant, but Vaxa had worked for the Council long enough to recognize euphemism for extinction protocols. Subject exhibits increasing neural synchronization with Administrator Vaxa, Krill reported to the medical team, while Vaxa pretended to analyze data across the laboratory. Recommend immediate termination of the research program. The medical officer Ziv flexed his sensory filaments over the readings. These patterns suggest mutual influence, not just one-way observation. The human is affecting her as much as she affects it. That's absurd, Vaexa interjected, abandoning the pretense of not listening. I'm simply adapting to his thought structures for more effective navigation. Ziv's compound eyes focused on her with clinical detachment. Then explain these autonomic responses. Your neurochemistry shifts to match his when connected. You're experiencing human emotions, Administrator. The accusation hung in the recycled air of the laboratory. For Meridians, emotional contamination from lesser species was considered a severe psychological disorder. Careers had ended over less. I'll increase my psychic shielding, Vaexa promised, desperate to continue the research. After they left, she hurriedly initiated another neural connection with Etrian. She needed to warn him about the scrutiny they faced, but something was wrong. Instead of the welcoming consciousness she'd grown accustomed to, she encountered rigid barriers and chaotic thought patterns. Etrian? She projected cautiously. His mind was fragmented, thoughts racing in defensive spirals. She penetrated deeper and found the cause. They had drugged him with psychoactive compounds designed to disrupt mental coherence. Standard procedure. Before intensive interrogation, they know. His fractured thoughts conveyed. Female officer. Questions about you. Our connections. Horror washed through Vaexa. If they were interrogating Etrian about their exchanges, the council already suspected the breach of protocol. She was running out of time. Listen carefully, she projected with all her strength. I'm going to help you escape, but you must trust me. She had never considered such treasonous action before, but the alternative was unthinkable. Once the council confirmed their unusual connection, both would face termination. Etrian as a dangerous anomaly, Vaexa as a contaminated asset. Through their neural bridge, she transferred critical information, security protocols, guard rotations, access codes. Then she did something unprecedented. She created a two-way psychic tether, a permanent connection between their minds that would function even without the laboratory equipment. Tonight, she projected, when the ship enters Earth's shadow, power systems cycle momentarily. Cell barriers weaken for 3.7 seconds. Be ready. Disconnecting was painful now, like tearing apart intertwined roots. As she withdrew, she felt Etrian's grateful determination flow through their new bond. That evening, Vaexa carefully adjusted the neural suppression field around Etrian's cell, creating a vulnerability timed with the power cycle. When alarms blared, at precisely the calculated moment, she projected surprise along with everyone else. The security feeds showed Etrian moving through the ship with impossible precision, avoiding patrols, accessing restricted areas. Only Vaexa knew he was following the mental map she'd implanted during their last connection. He's heading for the auxiliary craft bay, announced the security chief. Director Neff turned accusingly toward Vaexa. How could he possibly know the ship's layout? Human intuition is surprisingly advanced, she replied evenly, despite the terror pulsing through her. Through their psychic tether, she could feel Etrian's adrenaline, his focused determination as he reached the small scout vessel she'd prepared with the coordinates for Mars. When the scout ship detached and accelerated away from the thought harvester, Vaexa felt simultaneously relieved and bereft. Etrian had escaped, but their connection would soon stretch beyond sustainable range. As the distance increased, their psychic tether would inevitably break. Come with me. His thought came suddenly, surprisingly clear despite the growing distance. I can't, she responded sadly. They'd track the ship. Your only chance is alone. His consciousness pulsed with something complex. Gratitude, regret, and something uniquely human she had learned was called hope. I'll find a way back to you, was his final thought before the scout ship activated its jump drive, disappearing in a flash of distorted spacetime. The council would discover her treachery soon enough. The neural connection logs couldn't be completely erased. But as Vaexa stood watching the empty space where Etrian had vanished, she realized she didn't regret her actions. Something fundamental had changed within her. Priorities reordered, values shifted. She had tried to control a human mind but had instead been transformed by it. 6 lunar cycles after Etrian's escape, Vaxa stood before the Meridian High Council, her tentacles bound with neural suppressors. The vast chamber, carved from living crystal at the heart of the Meridian homeworld, amplified every sound, including the damning evidence against her. Administrator Vaxa allowed psychic contamination from the human specimen, intoned Chief Adjudicator Lam. Worse, she aided its escape, compromising our entire Earth observation program. Vaxa didn't deny the charges. The evidence was irrefutable. Security recordings, neural logs, the damning fact that Etrian had navigated the ship with insider knowledge only she could have provided. Her defense was unprecedented. The human species demonstrates a form of consciousness we've never encountered. They aren't suitable for conventional harvesting. Their minds are resources, interrupted Lom, like all lesser species. No, Vaxa said firmly. They're different. Their consciousness isn't just complex. It's adaptive, interactive. When we connect with human minds, they connect back. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. What she described violated fundamental assumptions about psychic hierarchies between species. This human somehow contaminated you, stated Council Elder Tzix. You've become an advocate for prey. I've become aware, Vaxa countered. Humans don't experience thoughts like we do, separate, controlled, compartmentalized. Their emotions and ideas blend together in ways that generate novel patterns continuously. That's why we can't simply harvest them. Their creativity isn't a resource to extract, it's a process to engage with. The council deliberated for 7 days. In the end, they couldn't dispute her neurological evidence showing the unique properties of human consciousness. But neither could they tolerate her betrayal. The sentence was exile, not the quick death of spacing she'd expected, but permanent banishment to Earth without technology, without contact with her kind. She would live among humans, stripped of her status and most of her psychic abilities. As the transport approached Earth, Vaxa felt the familiar tug of the psychic tether she'd created with Etrian. Though weakened by distance and the suppressors, it had never fully broken, a fact she'd carefully hidden from her captors. Now, as they prepared to abandon her in a remote forest region, she carefully reached along that tether. "I'm here," came the immediate response, stronger than she expected. "Northern Hemisphere. Coordinates incoming." Hope flared within her, another human emotion she'd adopted. The Meridian guards didn't notice her slight change in pigmentation as they activated the matter transporter, sending her to the surface with nothing but the minimal adaptive camouflage technology that would allow her to appear human. The forest materialized around her, towering conifers, undergrowth dense with vegetation unlike anything on her homeworld. Cold air filled unfamiliar lungs as her body adjusted to its new human configuration. The guards had at least granted her this dignity, the ability to blend in visually during her exile. For 3 days, she followed the psychic beacon of Etrian's mind, growing stronger as she approached. Her new body struggled with the terrain, muscles aching with each climb and descent. But the discomfort was trivial compared to the mounting anticipation. On the 4th day, she crested a ridge and saw a small cabin nestled against the mountainside, smoke curling from its chimney. Standing before it, looking directly toward her, was Etrian. Their physical reunion was strange, both familiar and disorienting. They had shared minds intimately, yet had barely occupied physical space together. His hand reaching for hers was both unknown and deeply recognized. "How did you find me?" she asked, her new vocal cords forming human words awkwardly. "After I escaped, I discovered something," he explained, leading her inside the cabin. "Our connection didn't fade with distance as you expected. Instead, it evolved." The interior was simple, but comfortable. On a table lay scattered papers covered with complex equations and diagrams, psychic waveform patterns she recognized immediately. "I've been studying what happened between us," Etrian continued. "The neural bridge you created wasn't just a communication channel. It fundamentally altered both our minds." He showed her his research, experiments he'd conducted on himself, measuring neural activity during their distant communications. The results confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. Their consciousness had developed a symbiotic relationship, each enhancing the other's capabilities. "Your people tried to harvest human creativity," he said, eyes intense with excitement. "But they fundamentally misunderstood how it works. It's not a resource to be extracted, it's a connection to be formed." As night fell and they sat before the fireplace, Vyaxa realized that her exile wasn't punishment but opportunity. On the Meridian homeworld, surrounded by rigid psychic hierarchies and ancient protocols, she could never have explored the true potential of what she and Etrian had discovered. "There are others like me," Etrian said quietly. "Humans sensitive to psychic energies. Not many, but enough. If we could teach them what we've learned." The implications staggered her. Not mind, control or thought harvesting, but genuine psychic partnership between species, something entirely new in the universe. For the first time since her exile began, Vyaxa felt not loss but possibility, another human concept she was growing to appreciate. 3 years passed on Earth while Vyaxa and Etrian refined their understanding of human meridian psychic potential. Their mountain cabin had evolved into a small research compound, carefully hidden from both human authorities and potential meridian observers. A dozen humans with latent psychic sensitivity had joined them, drawn by dreams and inexplicable compulsions that Vyaxa recognized as echoes of their developing technique. "The Council will eventually realize what we're doing," Vyaxa said one evening as they reviewed the latest neural synchronization data. Her human form had become comfortable now, though. She still occasionally reached for objects with tentacles she no longer possessed. "Let them come," Etrian replied with characteristic confidence. "We'll be ready." Their work had progressed beyond mere communication. They had developed what they called neural weaving, a technique allowing minds to share cognitive processing while maintaining individual identity. The applications were revolutionary. Accelerated learning, shared problem-solving capabilities, emotional intelligence enhancement. Most significantly, they had discovered that neural weaving created emergent properties neither species possessed alone. Human creativity combined with meridian psychic structure generated unprecedented insights, mathematical solutions to problems neither civilization had solved, philosophical frameworks transcending both cultures' limitations. But their peaceful research ended abruptly when orbital sensors detected a meridian vessel entering Earth's atmosphere under stealth protocols. Vyaxa felt the familiar psychic pressure of her former people long before the ship landed, a reconnaissance team, undoubtedly dispatched to evaluate the strange psychic anomalies their group was generating. "They've found us," she announced to the assembled researchers. Sooner than expected. Rather than panic, the group initiated their contingency protocol, a full neural weaving session involving all 14 members. As their minds synchronized, Vyaxa directed their collective consciousness toward the approaching Meridian scouts. The encounter that followed defied conventional description. Rather than defending against a Meridian psychic assault, their woven consciousness reached out in welcome, incorporating the scouts into an experience unlike anything in Meridian protocol. Instead of dominance or resistance, they offered partnership, showing rather than telling the potential of their discovery. 3 days later, when the Meridian scout ship departed Earth, it carried not captured specimens, but a comprehensive data package and 2 voluntary ambassadors from the research compound. Their mission: present directly to the High Council the evidence of what human Meridian collaboration could achieve. Vyaxa remained behind, her exile now self-chosen. Through the enhanced psychic tether she maintained with the ambassadors, she witnessed the upheaval their revelation caused on the Meridian homeworld. The Council initially rejected the findings as contamination, ordering immediate quarantine of the returning scouts. But the evidence was irrefutable. The mathematical solutions alone, particularly to the quantum gravity problem that had stymied Meridian physicists for generations, forced them to acknowledge that something unprecedented had emerged from human Meridian mental collaboration. 6 months later, The Meridian research vessel that entered Earth orbit came not in secrecy but in open diplomatic approach. On board was Council Elder Thitsix herself, her presence signaling the seriousness with which the Meridians now regarded humanity. The meeting took place at the compound, now expanded into a proper research facility. As Thitsix's consciousness touched the collective neural weaving for the first time, Vaxa felt the Elder's initial shock, followed by dawning comprehension. This changes everything, Thitsix's thought reverberated through their connection. Not harvesting, but partnership. Later, as formal diplomatic procedures began between selected human authorities and Meridian representatives, Vaxa found Etrian standing alone on the observation deck, watching the stars. "Did you ever imagine this outcome?" she asked, joining him at the railing. "When I first invaded your mind on that research ship?" Etrian smiled, the same expression that had haunted her after their first neural connection years ago. "Not specifically, but I sensed possibility. Something unique in how your mind touched mine. I was supposed to control you," she reminded him. "Harvest your creativity for my people. Instead, you got addicted to my thoughts," he teased, referencing the journey that had brought them here. "Not just your thoughts," Vaxa corrected, taking his hand in her still sometimes awkward human grip, "but what our thoughts created together." Above them, Meridian and human scientists boarded shuttles bound for the diplomatic vessel, carrying the first jointly developed neural weaving protocols, the foundation for a relationship unlike any either species had imagined possible. Not predator and prey, not controller and controlled, but genuine partners in consciousness. Vaxa had indeed failed her original mission spectacularly. She had tried to control the human mind but had instead discovered something far more valuable, the first true psychic symbiosis between species in known galactic history. Her addiction to human thought patterns had transformed not just her own life, but potentially the future of two civilizations. As Earth's sun set behind the mountains, casting the research compound in golden light, Vaxa reflected that some failures were infinitely more valuable than success. Another concept she had learned from her human companions. The Meridian Council had sentenced her to exile, never realizing they had actually sent her home. The end.